As Tom said, I'm Scott. Can everyone hear me okay? I can be very loud and obnoxious, so I'll try just to be loud tonight. First off, if you have a cell phone, please put it on vibrate or something, just so we don't interrupt Audrey while she's speaking in a little bit. The sad fact is, for the last 4 years, the Animal Legal Defense Fund in California does annual rankings on how states are doing with their animal welfare laws. And for the last 4 years, we have ranked 49th out of 50. We are better than Kentucky. That is it. Every other state has better laws or uses them more efficiently than we do. That is sad. I'm going to talk about a couple of recent cases that kind of really show some of the downfalls to our current laws. And I'm going to go over a few of the areas that the Animal Legal Defense Fund has pointed out that really are not working in this state, and what the current legislation we're proposing, SF 421, would do to change those problems. How many of you seen in the news recently the story of the 1,000 animals in Village? Everybody. Now, I'm sorry, 1,000 animals, that tells me this person is probably an animal hoarder. I don't care what they want to call themselves, but they're a hoarder. Statistically speaking, if a person who is convicted of animal hoarding does not seek psychological evaluation and treatment, they have an almost 100% chance of reoffending. Case in point, Roger Blue, a couple of years ago, the Animal Rescue League removed almost 500 animals from a property in Drakesville. Before this man even went to trial, he moved across the border into Missouri and started collecting animals all over again. He was convicted here. He was convicted in Missouri of 2 felonies as a repeat offender. But there was no psychological counseling ordered by the court, which just left the door open for him to reoffend over and over again in Iowa. How many of you remember the story this last summer of Lindsay Morrow with the no-kill animal rescue in Warren County? One of the big problems that was found by the ALDF was the fact that key terms in our current law are not defined. And some of the terms that are defined aren't defined well. Ms. Morrow was charged with animal torture for the 3 dogs that slowly starved to death in her custody. The Warren County prosecutor filed animal torture charges. Seems like a fairly straight case. You let an animal suffer and slowly die, it's torture. Unfortunately, in Iowa, in order to torture an animal and be convicted, they had to prove either depraved or sadistic intent in what you did. So you either have to get a great deal of joy from it, or you have to get sexual gratification. If they can't prove one of those 2 things, no matter what you do, it's not torture. That is wrong. Animal suffering is animal suffering, especially if it occurs over a long period of time. So let me go over a couple of the major flaws that the ALDF has found with our law and what we propose to do to change it. As I said, a lot of definitions are lacking in our current code. How many of you know what shelter is? I will tell you the state of Iowa doesn't. They do not define what shelter for a companion animal is. Throw a cardboard box in your yard, that may be shelter. Throw last night's food out from your dinner, that may be food for your dog or cat. We are proposing more stringent and tighter definitions so county attorneys, law enforcement have a clear-cut idea of what they're enforcing instead of having to guess whether or not it applies. Punishments that don't fit the crime. Case in point really is animal torture. The first time you are convicted in the state of Iowa for animal torture, it is an aggravated misdemeanor. So if you set fire to an animal, hang it, cut it up, it's a misdemeanor, it's not even a felony. Every state surrounding Nebraska that has an animal torture provision, first offense is a felony. They recognize this as a serious, serious crime. And it's a precursor to other crimes against people. We have not figured that out yet, but we're hoping we can. We would make animal torture a first offense felony, and we would enhance some of the penalties for other violations depending on the situation. If you commit animal abuse in front of a juvenile, it's going to impact that juvenile. So that should be a more serious crime than if you do it by yourself. If you're a repeat offender, if you've done this 3 or 4 times, there should be stricter penalties involved. That's what we're looking for. Iowa laws are kind of contradictory. You can neglect your own pet in the state of Iowa, but you cannot abuse your pet in Iowa. In order for it to be abuse, which is a more significant crime, it has to be someone else doing it to your pet. And they can get out of it if they have your permission to do it. That is wrong. That's confusing to judges, it's confusing to prosecutors, it makes no sense. We want to get rid of some of these strange twists and exemptions in the law, make it more clear-cut and more just across the board. Like I said, torture, they require depraved and sadistic intent, which is ridiculous. It's almost impossible to prove intent in court in some cases. We want the bar to be, if you cause an animal unnecessary, significant injury, damage, or death for a prolonged period of time, that's torture. It doesn't matter if it made you happy, sad, or what. That animal suffered and you should pay the price for it. One big problem we've found in a lot of law here in Iowa, people are going to reoffend. They do it. And in Iowa law, the only case where they have to seek psychological counseling or assessment is animal torture. So if you abuse an animal, if you abandon an animal to die, you don't have to see a psychologist. We would like to see the most egregious crimes under the code require mandatory psychological counseling. We want to nip this in the bud before it goes on to other animals or to people. Final thing that's really a big change that we're looking at, there is no protection for future pet ownership. If you are convicted of animal neglect, abuse, or torture, you can turn right back around, go to the local shelter or local pet store, and buy another pet and start it all over again. We want to make sure that that can't happen. If you're convicted of egregious crimes, we want to put time limits on when you can have pets so you can get some help and fix this problem instead of just repeating the cycle. That's honestly it in a nutshell for SF 421. Our laws are outdated, they're not well written, they need a major revision, and that's what we're working for. What we really need is the assistance of everyone in this room. I can call a state senator or state representative 20 times, they'll nod their head, say thank you, and they'll go about their business. You, as the people who voted them into office, you've got a whole lot more power than I do in speaking to these legislators. I encourage you, we have the ARL Humane Action Network on Facebook. Go there, sign up. If votes for legislation are coming out that we need grassroots support to get it passed, we will contact you, say, this is coming up, contact your senator, contact your representative, let them know this is important to you. We're not going to sell your phone number, your email address to Pella Windows or anyone else, so you're not going to get bombarded thanks to this. But we have to have support from everyone. If we don't have it, it's never going to pass. Myself, Tom, and Josh will be around to answer questions about SF 421 after Audrey speaks. But, that being said, I get the privilege of introducing Audrey. Audrey Jimenez manages the ASPCA's legislative advocacy efforts and strategizes the development of direct citizen lobbying across the country. She manages 3 volunteer programs and travels the nation training advocates to use their voices to help animals. As part of her advocacy management, Audrey oversees and coordinates the planning of all advocacy-based events and community outreach efforts, including ballot measures and campaign work. She joined the ASPCA from the Humane Society of the United States, where she was a legislative coordinator for the Federal Affairs team. Audrey graduated cum laude from the University of Georgia in 2012 with a degree in journalism with minors in Spanish and religious studies. She's now earning her master's in environmental sustainability from Harvard University. I said I was going to drop this, but she lives in Austin, Texas with her husband and her 2 bulldogs, Mrs. Peaches and Biggies. Will you join me? Let's give a good Iowa welcome to Audrey Jimenez.
I'm so excited to be here with y'all tonight, and I wanted to give a huge thanks to Tom and Ashley and their whole team. They've been so kind and welcomed me here and let me use this space tonight and gave me an amazing tour today. And I have to say, the work they do here is top notch. I travel all over the country looking at animal shelters and talking to folks, and honestly, y'all are so lucky to have such an awesome organization in your community, so let's give them a hand. So, as you just heard, my name's Audrey, and this is Biggie, the love of my life, and my little Peaches, and the guy in the middle is a little man that I met on a shelter visit that just completely stole my heart, so I like to use him where I can. So my title is really confusing. I really don't even know what it means, but basically what I do, as you just heard, is travel around the country and train advocates and teach them about the legislation the ASPCA works on in DC and Congress, and then also we have a state team, so sometimes we do state legislation too. So that's kind of what I do, and the best part about my job is that I get to meet folks like you who share the same passion as I do for animals, and that really keeps me going. So thank you guys for even being here tonight in this freezing weather and not in front of your fireplace cuddling with your animals. So this is just sort of a short little agenda for us. I'm going to talk about what is this very weird word lobbying, what does that even mean? I'm going to cover some of our priority federal legislative bills. I'm going to talk a little bit about something that we call the appropriations process, which you will learn why that's specifically important for all of you tonight. And then I'm going to talk about what you can do to help animals from your own home. Things you can do that will have a profound impact on animals all over the country for years to come. And then we'll take some questions. So who thinks they can answer what is lobbying? Go for it.
Advocacy.
Advocacy. It's a good start. Anybody else want to build on top of that? Oh, come on, guys.
Talking to the senators at the Capitol, letting them know what your issues are, and let them, that they're the ones that are going to go in there and pass the laws, and let them know what you would like to see.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Great. That's very good. All very good. And so it's important. I'll let you guys get your little giggles out. It's important that we do this for animals specifically because I know it seems very obvious, but they cannot do that for themselves. Just like children, we have to be their advocates, and we have to go in and use our voice as voters and people who elect officials and make sure that they know we expect them to use their power to protect animals. So I'm going to delve a little bit into some of our federal priorities, and I think we have about 7 or 8 right now. We just introduced 2 new ones, so bear with me. And what I'm going to say is that attorneys wrote this stuff, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm going to give you guys the brief overview, and I want you to think about these bills in terms of issues. So the PAWS Act deals with pets who are sort of caught up in really bad domestic violence situations. And I'm sure everyone in here knows a story of a pet that was caught in an abusive home. The owner couldn't leave because they had nowhere to go that would accept him or her and their pet. And, folks who are victims of domestic violence are often stay in these situations because they're terrified of what would happen to their pet if they left. And we have recognized that that's a huge issue and something has to be done about it because we know lives are lost because of this. I personally heard a testimony from a woman at a briefing just last year in DC, and her husband was planning, he had left a note, he was planning on killing her that night, and the shelter actually took her in. They made a spot for her and her dog, and they said she slept by her dog for 3 days. She would not leave his side. So it's an extremely heartbreaking situation, and the PAWS Act would address several sort of circumstances that play out in these situations that we think would alleviate some of this pressure for victims. So it would expand the Violence Against Women's Act to make it a prosecutable offense for someone to cross a state line and harm the pet of someone that they're abusing. That's huge because, if state lines are very close often to folks, where they could be going to find refuge. So if they cross state lines, that becomes a federal crime. So it would make that prosecutable. It would also make vet bills able for repayment if they harm the pet and the woman or man can't afford those vet bills. They shouldn't be paying for them anyways. And it would also authorize funds to create spaces in domestic violence shelters where animals can go and stay with their owners through these awful, traumatic times. So this bill has a lot of support. Anything over 218 co-sponsors is has a, that's like really, really high numbers. That's over half of the House of Representatives. So this bill has a lot of bipartisan support, bipartisan meaning Republicans and Democrats see this as a really important issue, which is amazing. There's also a really healthy number of co-sponsors in the Senate too. The PACT Act is, just to be very clear, a very underground sort of issue, and that is animal crushing, and I bet most of you are not even aware of what this is. It's a terrible sort of fetish movement, and the distribution of crushing videos is illegal, but it's not illegal to actually do the act of crushing an animal right now. This is just one of those sort of weird mishaps that happened when a bill was passed. They made the distribution of videos illegal, but not the actual act. So we want to pass this law to make sure that this ceases to ever happen again. And again, the co-sponsorship is through the roof on this bill. So just note that, everyone almost recognizes that this is a very important issue and should not be tolerated whatsoever in our country. This SAFE Act is a bill that I have personally been working on for 5 years. The issue of horse slaughter is something that's very near and dear to me, and what this bill would do is make it illegal to operate a horse slaughter plant in the United States and also illegal to ship horses out of the country to be slaughtered for human consumption. So I'll talk a little bit more about horse slaughter in a bit, but you'll see that we're at 207 co-sponsors on this bill, so we need 11 more co-sponsors to reach the threshold of us being able to go to leadership in the House and Senate and say, hey, over half of your chamber supports this, please bring it to the floor for a vote. It's time. It's time that we say horse slaughter is bad and Americans don't agree with it. The HEART Act is a bill that we just introduced a few years ago, so it's on its second Congress right now. And the HEART Act gets at the idea that if dogs or hawks, whatever, are seized from an animal fighting situation, then a shelter or rescue or the government should not have to pay for the care of those animals throughout the court process. The person who is convicted the crime should. Being an organization that rescues thousands of animals a year, we understand this firsthand. I know ARL does too. It can be very, very expensive to rehab animals after they're seized from animal fighting operations. They are emotionally abused, they're physically abused, they mostly never had vet care, they have tons of behavioral training they have to go through to make them adoptable, which is obviously our end goal. So this bill would make owners financially responsible for that care, and it would also speed up the court process. Right now, it's very slow. It can take over a year for this court process to be wrapped up, at which time animals are adoptable. So the Department of Justice recognizes that animals are live victims and that this process should be sped up and addressed as quickly as possible. So this is very important for us as an organization to pass. It's got a really low number of co-sponsors, you'll see, because there's a lot of talk right now about reforming the criminal justice system and decreasing the number of offensible actions. Especially restitution is a very touchy subject right now, so I think that's why this bill has a lower number of co-sponsors. This one sort of hits home for everyone this year. So many communities have been affected by extreme natural disasters this year, and our response team has been on the ground nonstop, I think probably since late summer, dealing with all of these tragic events. I'm in Austin, and when Harvey hit, it was just such chaos throughout the state trying to figure out what to do with all of these animals in shelters. There was no plan. So it became a nightmare, and I feel sure that animals died because there was not a well thought out plan for a disaster like this. What this bill would do is require that any organization that's licensed under the Animal Welfare Act, so an animal shelter, a zoo, a breeding facility, a testing facility, any organization that has animals and uses them commercially would have to come up with, implement, and keep updated and submit to the USDA their plan for what they intend to do if a natural disaster strikes their area. This was just introduced recently, and it already has 48 co-sponsors, so we're really hoping to get traction on this bill because, as we all know, when an issue is really percolating in the media and it's the forefront of everyone's minds, we recognize that that's definitely the sweet spot for us to pass a piece of legislation. The next bill I'm going to touch on is one that y'all may have heard of, the issue of horse soaring. It's a very sort of insular world, and it happens mostly in Kentucky and Tennessee. But basically what horse soaring is it's a competition where folks take horse hoofs and they apply chemicals to the hoof before they put the shoe on that makes it very painful for horses to walk. And so they have these like very unnatural extended gaits, and the higher the gait, the more points you get. So as you can imagine, the higher a gait, probably the more pain that horse is in. I know it's just completely outrageous that this even happens and is legal. So right now this industry is self-policing, which is a reason that it's profitable and almost no one ever gets in trouble for doing this to horses. So what this law would do is to say that USDA has to oversee this operation, and it would prohibit the use of action devices, which are listed here, anything that is intended to inflict pain on the horse, and it would increase penalties for anyone applying these devices or chemicals to horses. And again, you'll see that there's a really huge number of co-sponsors on this bill. People definitely recognize this as something that is unacceptable. We just introduced the Puppy Protection Act and the Wolf Act. I hope everyone has caught on to the fact now that we spend a lot of time on acronyms, so SAFE Act, Aspca, Wolf Act. I cannot tell you the hours that I've sat around the conference table in our DC office trying to come up with like something cute to refer to a bill for. I feel sure that y'all are all completely aware of does everyone understand what a puppy mill is in this room? Yeah, okay. So puppy mills is a commercial breeding operation where very little attention is paid to the animals. They're seen as profit makers, not companions. So the Puppy Protection Act would just strengthen the standards. Right now, anyone who has a USDA license to breed dogs, the standards are very low. They can live on wire floors that are stacked. It's just terrible. No veterinary care is required. So this bill would address all of those shortfalls that USDA does not require licensed breeders. And the Wolf Act would prohibit USDA from giving a license to breed dogs to a sister if her brother's operation was shut down and he was written violations, or transferring ownership of his company to someone like a best friend or something. They do this a lot to keep their operation going. They just transfer the license to someone that they're related to. And this bill was just introduced about a month ago, but I wanted to give a short little anecdote here because I'm seeing some yawns and this is coming at a perfect time. This little guy right here is Marcellus, and he is my foster dog. I got Marcellus about 2 weeks ago, and he is 10 years old, and up until 6 months ago, he lived at a puppy mill in Oklahoma. So you'll see his tattoo in his ear. That's how they identify them. He has about 3 teeth. One has to be pulled on Monday. He has been living with an abscess for God only knows how long. You'll see how his puppy pads are very large. It's because he lived on wire floors for so long. He's about 7 pounds underweight, and his little hips are about this wide from probably never having had any exercise as a growing dog. But he's also deaf and blind. But he is the sweetest little soul. I mean, he's just such a little love bug. And I just wanted to explain this to you guys so you really understand the gravity of the situation that dogs face in puppy mills. They have no life. They have no emotional stimulation, no mental stimulation, zero vet care. His little body is just destroyed. So this is something that I'm really passionate about, and I hope you guys are too. This is a bill that I think is really ripe for passage. So, no one loves puppy mills. This is something that we have to pass. So I'm going to get into something now that's a little complicated and a little tricky, but I'm going to try to make it as easy to understand as possible for you guys. So every year, something that I work on that takes a ton of effort is called the Defund Amendment. And you'll know that Congress passes a new budget every year. So the Defund Amendment is part of that budget. And basically what it says is USDA cannot spend money inspecting horse slaughter plants. We have been successful at implementing the Defund Amendment into the huge, big $1 trillion budget every year since 2005. But every year it takes me pounding the pavement in about 12 states. It takes about 7 months of grassroots cultivation. It takes hours of logging members on the Hill just to be sure it's re-implemented, because there are widely profitable people and companies who want horse slaughter to return to our country, unfortunately. So it's very difficult. We win or lose by about 1 vote every year. This year, Congress actually just about 30 minutes ago passed a budget that was due in September. So we're thinking that this is going to come up again in probably somewhere between April and June. And I'm going to tell you why that's important for you. Before I do that, I just wanted to share with you guys, we did a poll in 2012. We commissioned a poll to gauge what public opinion was on the issue of horse slaughter, because it's something that you're either really for it or you're really against it. So we wanted to see how does that fall out in terms of quantity. And we found that over 80% of Americans across all race, across all zip codes, across all regions oppose this. They just, the thought of eating a horse, which most Americans consider companions, is just like too much for them. It feels like a cat or dog. It's just, they really, really disapproved with that idea. Who can tell me who this guy is? Right, David Young. He is almost everyone in here's member of Congress. And he is particularly important to me and my team because we are seeing a mass exodus just this year of our long-term friends in DC who have championed animal welfare issues for us. And that's really problematic for us because it takes years to cultivate those relationships with members of Congress for them to be able to say, I want to put my name on an animal welfare bill. I feel confident enough in my community that they will support it. I trust the ASPCA's opinion that this is the right thing to do. So David Young is someone that we are looking at and hoping really starts to champion animal welfare issues for us. He's ripe for the job. He's a moderate Republican. He's a really nice man. He likes animals. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to ask you guys to work with me to make sure that he is working for animals in Congress. Specifically because I was just talking about this defund amendment, this weird language that prohibits horse slaughter plants from reopening effectively in our country. Every year, That language is part of the Agriculture Appropriations Bill, which just means any money the government spends on any agriculture enterprises, which horse slaughter is a part of. Starts here, and then it goes to the Appropriations Committee, which he is a member of. There are 52 people on this committee, and as I just said, we win or lose by about 1 vote every year. So every single vote on that committee is gold to us. We need it. We have to have it. He is a member of this committee, so we not only need his full support behind that amendment, but we need him to go to some of his friends and say, you know what? I really think you need to vote yes on this bill. You're kind of in the middle. You don't hear a lot from your constituents about it, but I really need you to do this for me as your colleague. That works more than anything I could do. And for him to go do that, he needs to know that you guys fully back him. He needs to know that this community is 100% behind him and that you want him to do all that he can to ensure horse slaughter doesn't return here. So a little bit about Congressman Young. He has actually already co-sponsored 4 of the bills I just talked about, which is amazing. He needs to co-sponsor the puppy mill bills, the HARD Act, so the animal fighting bill, and the Emergency Planning Act, which was just introduced recently too. I see you guys taking pictures, and I just want you all to know I'm going to send you this PowerPoint tomorrow morning. About 9 a.m. Be expecting this in your inbox so you can review all these slides because there's some really good info here. I also want to be sure you have his contact information and let you know that he has an office right here in Des Moines. And all that office, the whole purpose of that office is for y'all to go in and meet with his district director, talk to her about issues that are important to you here in the community, and she relays that right up the chain to him in DC. So let's talk about ways that you guys can reach out to him and be effective and positive and steadfast in your communication. Social media, letter writing, phone calls, and getting out in front of him, making sure he and his staff know who you are. Before we talk about any of those tools though, it's vital that you guys know the goal of what you want to say to him before you call him. So don't call him, hey, Congressman Young, I've got a bulldog. She had her nails clipped today, but I really, oh, my mailbox just got hit. I really wanted to ask you about this bill. It needs to be very precise. He probably has about 5 minutes to talk with you, max. These are just a few asks that I drafted for y'all in terms of communicating to him, but especially if you're placing a phone call, it needs to be about 1 or 2 sentences. You're probably going to talk to someone at his front desk, and they're going to write down what you say and hand it off to the chief of staff later, tally up the issues, and hand it to the congressman at the end of the night. So this is the interactive portion of our PowerPoint tonight. Who has a phone in here, an iPhone? Oh, come on. Okay, so if you have an iPhone, and you use Twitter or Facebook, I want you to get out your phone right now and say one of these things to your congressman. So I'm going to give you guys 1 minute, and I know for a fact at night congressmen are checking their feeds. They're looking and saying, what are people talking to me about tonight? What are they asking me to do? So I want to see everybody on your phones. And if you don't do it tonight, please do it in the morning when I send you this PowerPoint. Does anybody have any questions so far about the bills that I just talked about? While folks are tweeting? Yes.
On the horse slaughter bill, do you know if there are any commercial operations in Iowa that would be providing money to his campaign and
That's a
also
good idea.
lobbying?
That's a good thought. So horse slaughter is actually not
currently legal, but I mean organization that
Right.
would be chomping at the bit for this to be available to them.
I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't find it far-fetched because this is a heavily ag-centered state. The reason I don't know the answer to that is because he has been sort of willy-nilly about horse slaughter, not really on board with it until recently. which we'll get to. But generally, when we do a deep dive into districts to see what else is in their district, why would they be so against horse slaughter? It's if they are very vocal and have stated publicly, horse slaughter needs to return, it's good for our economy, all of these things. We've done that for several members of Congress and found that they have either organizations in their district that process meat for zoos. So obviously, if horse slaughter were legal, their operations would expand greatly. Or dog food companies who put horse meat in their food. So that's a really good point, and that's usually that sentiment is coming from some sort of corporate pressure.
I'm just going to add this. I advocate for a kill pen that and post and network horses to keep them from going to Mexico. And there's so many that go every week to Mexico. So
Yeah.
they say people want to save them. Well, okay, start saving them.
Yeah, over 100,000 actually go over the borders every year. It's big. That sounds like a really big number, and it is. But there are over 8 million horses in our country, so we see this as an issue that's completely like we can do this. We can find the resources. We can work out the logistics of this, and it's a huge, huge priority for the ASPCA. All right. The next tool that y'all have in your toolbox as voters is letters to the editor. Has anyone in here ever submitted a letter to the editor in your local newspaper here in Des Moines? Nobody? Yeah, you? Nice. All right, well get ready because you're about to. This is a huge, huge tool for advocates and citizen lobbying because if you write an LTE in your paper here, and you say, Congressman Young, please support the HART Act, and then you have your LTE under it, his office is going to see that the first thing in the morning. They're going to cut it out of the newspaper and lay it on his desk for him. I've seen this happen numerous times. So if you want to get in front of your member of Congress, this is the way to do it. Why do they care so much about this? Because he knows not only is he reading it this morning, but tons of other people in his district are reading it. And they're going to say, what's the HART Act? Why is he not supporting helping victims of dogfighting? And he is going to do something about it. I have heard of members of Congress actually reaching out to the folks that submit these to the newspapers and just letting them know, hey, I read your LTE, I'm going to sign on to this bill. So it's a really, really good, easy tool for you to use as an advocate. And I'll be quite honest with you, I draft a lot of LTEs and send them to advocates to place. So you don't even have to worry about saying the right thing. We'll do all the hard work for you. One thing that I really want us to do tonight is to continue encouraging Congressman Young to do really good things for animals and to support animal welfare legislation. I think if you want to, I want you to write him a thank you note. I brought little cards with me tonight, and write him a thank you note saying, thank you for co-sponsoring the SAFE Act. Thank you for co-sponsoring the HART Act and championing animal welfare issues. I'll collect these little thank you cards from you guys tonight, and I'll mail them off to him tomorrow to his office here in Des Moines. But if you're gonna write a thank you note, the most important piece, other than what you say inside, is making sure you put your return mailing address on there so that he knows who is sending it to him and can reach back out to you. So Amy is going to pass out those thank you cards right now. And the more thank yous he gets, these are members of Congress, guys, okay, they have really big egos. The more thank you cards that he gets, he's gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm doing a good job. People are happy with me. I got re-election coming up in 2018. I'm doing good. Like, I need to keep doing things for animals. As I said, I'm gonna send y'all this so you'll have all this contact information. And after I wrap up the PowerPoint, I'm gonna come back to this slide so that you can address your thank you cards, okay? So don't feel pressured. Another obvious tool for advocates is to just place a quick call to the office. And this is an easy thing to do. It's not intimidating. You just pick up the phone, talk to him or his staff, make your ask, hang it up. It's very straightforward. Like there's no tricks involved in it at all. Actually, One of my good friends and a really amazing advocate in the Des Moines area is here tonight. Her name is Amy Bonsall, and she's actually our district captain for Des Moines. And I'm going to bring her up for a second because she actually had a phone call with Congressman Young, was it 3 weeks ago?
I think so.
About-
Right before the end of the year.
Okay, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about it because it was pretty amazing.
Okay, so I've been with Audrey for like a year now, and I'll be honest, she's amazing. CA is amazing with like helping you learn how to be an advocate, and they really will help you do anything. Like if you want to write a letter, hey Audrey, I don't know how to write this, you know, I'm not the greatest writer, can you do it? Sure. A couple days later, letter, send it out.
Yep.
So we were working on the SAFE Act, and simple, super simple. Talked to Audrey, talked to a couple people, kind of made an outline of what to talk about. Really just got literally like 3 sentences of what's important. If there's something like you're passionate about, add that in there. And Congressman Young is super nice, super easy to talk to. It was not intimidating at all. He's really on board to continue helping out around here with the horses and welcomes conversations. And his office staff was super easy with contacting them. The whole process was super easy.
Yeah, and what's the most important piece of this is that 2 days after her phone call with him, he co-sponsored the SAFE Act. He'd never co-sponsored this bill before. So I'm telling you, it's literally that simple and that empowering for him to go and say, hey, one of my constituents took the time to be prepared for this call. She gave me 10 minutes of her day. I need to do this. You know, she cares about it. It's important to our community. So please, place a quick call. And town halls are really invigorating. Who's ever been to a town hall of a member of Congress? Yeah? They're pretty cool to see. And members of Congress are sort of shying away from these things because they've become really charged over the past year. But attending a town hall is so important for you because this man votes on your behalf in DC. So you better get out there and see what he's talking about, what he's saying to questions in public, what he's saying he's going to do for y'all back in DC. I mean, a lot of decisions he makes really impact you. So please go to these town halls. It's really important. And it's sort of, you know, they kind of post them a few days ahead of time. They may email you or they may post it on Facebook. So really, really important that you're signed up for his newsletters. If you're not getting newsletters from your member of Congress, you definitely should be, because I get mine every week. He tells me what he voted on, and then I pick up the phone and say that I'm unhappy with all of his votes because I have a member from Texas who's we have very different views. And then your local newspapers may post them. And there's also this really cool tool that I discovered this year. It's called the Town Hall Project. And they update their website multiple times a day, and they post any upcoming town halls of members of Congress. So that's a really quick way for you to find out if he has one scheduled. And if you do go there, please let me know, because I would love to help you develop what you want to say to him at this town hall. You get one question. So that one question better be like on point. It's really important to start out thanking him for all that he's done to help animals, you know, massage their egos, keep them feeling really good about themselves. And then have your direct ask, like we talked about. And then also, just like our meeting tonight, town halls are a great way for you to network with other folks in your community. And these are just a few of the volunteer programs that I manage for the government relations team at the A. Our horse action team, which Amy is a part of, and it's grown in a year and a half to almost 2,000 folks across the country. Basically, these advocates take action on the Defund Amendment and the SAFE Act. Like, their peanut butter in life is stopping horse slaughter. So If you love horses, I encourage you to do that. We send out monthly newsletters and let advocates know when the defund amendment is coming around, and we work with them to make sure their members co-sponsoring the SAFE Act. The district captain program, which I just mentioned, is a program for folks who want to commit a higher level to making sure that their community is engaged in these issues and working with their congressman. Amy is our district captain for Des Moines and for Congressman Young's district, so part of her job is to help lead y'all since I can't be here all the time. So if you're interested in doing any of the things we've talked about tonight, please find Amy after our meeting and me, and I want to be sure you get to meet her. The HEART team is, again, specifically, they work on passing the HEART Act, the animal fighting bill. So again, we make sure that those folks, their members are co-sponsors of the HEART Act, and they try to raise awareness for this issue. The Advocacy Brigade, most of which you should be a part of, but some of you may not be, depending on how you signed up for this meeting. It's just like our free national network of advocates who want to be updated on animal welfare legislation. So basically, if you're a member of Congress, if we know he's going to have the opportunity to vote on one of these bills, we'll email you and ask you to place a quick call. It's like a very simple way, and I'll also, that's how I'll let you know, come to your area and invite you to things. So if you're not a member of our Advocacy Brigade, please make sure you sign up for that. So after we leave this meeting, you guys have learned a lot. I've just done a huge brain dump on you. So I want you to sort of let this information percolate. Please feel free to email me. You should all have my email address. I'm going to send a follow-up email in the morning, but please ask me questions. It's my job to answer questions and work with you, so please don't be scared to befriend me. Make sure you sign up for Congressman Young's newsletters, please, and follow him on social media because they tweet or they post on Facebook several times a day. It's just a good way to keep up with what he's doing on your behalf. And mail your thank you letter. Actually, for you guys, write it because I'm going to mail them for you tomorrow. And one thing to not forget is to continue pushing. If you talk to him and he says, I'll consider it, I'll think about it, thanks for raising this issue with me. Say, okay, thank you for your time. In 2 weeks, go back. Persistence wins the game in DC. Advocates who are the squeaky wheel get things done as long as they're nice and they don't take off the office. They sort of appreciate the commitment that you have towards whatever issue you're calling about or writing about.